Hello. So I've just gotten into bed, still with my full face and makeup on from filming. And I am about to start Blood Over Bright Haven. I just love the cover of this book. It's the main reason why I bought it. But I've heard so many good things about it. I've just read quite a lot of thrillers, and this seems like vaguely thriller-ish, except in a dark academia fantasy kind of world. So I am absolutely here for it. I also just started replaying Skyrim, and in that you can become a mage and go to the mages college. So it's matching the vibe of my video games. I am going into this book fairly blind, but I have seen people have overwhelming reactions and do reaction videos where they find out like the big reveals and they're walking around the room and having a big dramatic reaction. So that's what I'm hoping for. That's why I think this might be a good reading vlog, even though I don't really have big reactions. Someone can come up behind me and scare me, and I'll just be like, "Oh, okay." Um, don't know why that is. Maybe something I should look into, but I'm not going to worry about it too much for now. So, without further ado, let me crack this bad boy open, and we can get started. Okay, so I've just finished chapter one. That was quite harrowing. I thought it was a really strong opener. We meet this tribe, and because it's fantasy, I'm like, I don't really know what's going on, but there's hints at all of their different relationships, hints at family members, there's a child. You really get the sense that everyone's a big family, that they have this deep culture, that they've been struggling to survive in the wilderness, and that they're about to embark on something very dangerous that they're not expecting to survive. So we start the story with very high stakes. They're talking about the blight, and we don't know what that is, but very soon we find out because they all try to run across this frozen lake and they all die in the process. Some of them get hit with the blight and unravel into bloody flowers on the ice, and others go through the ice. And so we're left with our main central character who makes it across, his devastation as he one by one loses everyone he loves, everyone in the community, everyone who meant a lot to him and meant a lot to their community. And he survives alongside his niece. He reaches the other side of the lake and breaks through this kind of force field into this city and lands on a pavement. And he's very nearly killed there by some guards who both look very similar, but eventually they decide that he can stay, and he claims his niece is his daughter, and he gets to keep her alive because that's part of this place's culture, apparently. So, a very intriguing and devastating start. And because I've read the blurb, I can put two and two together. I can see that this character is going to be the janitor that works with our main character, the mage, to uncover some of the conspiracies in this place at this mage college, which I haven't got to yet. But yes, I am thoroughly invested already. I'm going to stop filming this for the day and I'm going to just sit and casually read. And I will check in with you again next time something really exciting happens. So I'm back reading Blood Over Brighthaven, nearly at page 100. It's just starting to get dark outside, and I've got my cozy Cath Kidston Harry Potter mug full of chamomile tea. Not the best lighting for being on camera, kind of looks like I'm in hell, but actually I'm in heaven, and the real hell would be turning on the big light, because the big light is the worst thing ever. I will check back in a minute once I reach page 100. And I've got my trusty mood lighting. I cannot read without this lamp on. It just makes such a nice cozy vibe in the room. And that salt lamp is not bright enough. It does look kind of cool on camera though. I've got this little dude beside me having a snooze. He's such a good companion. Such a good boy. Okay, So it's now darker outside and I've reached the 99 page mark, which is chapter 6, Suited to Serve. So far since the prologue, we've met our main character, Skiona, and she's a very interesting character. She's very intelligent, she is very competent at crafting magical spells. Our first few chapters cover her doing the test to become a high mage, and then she passes and becomes a high mage. But we learn a lot about the world. We learn that the city they live in, Tiran or whatever it's called, is very sexist, and that she's actually the first high mage to ever make it through as a woman. We see her settling into this new job, and we see a lot of sexism at every turn. They talk about it a lot, and the other high mages shame her, belittle her, they refuse to call her high mage, and it's just very clearly a patriarchy. They take the piss out of her quite a lot, and one of the ways they do this is that instead of finding her a proper assistant, they match her up with the janitor, who is this Quen man that doesn't really have the education and the schooling to be a research assistant. Rather than a pure heart, she just goes along with this and ends up taking him on legitimately as her assistant. And this is cool because this Quen man is the man that we met in the first chapter, Thomil. A lot of tension is added in the writing here because we know a lot more about Thomil than she does. We can see what he's been through to make it into the city. We can see that he's lost his whole family, that he had this rich culture and a whole community that was really important to him. He's now in the city, he's a second class citizen. He basically lives in a really working class or slummy kind of area of the city, and they're kind of the servant class. We also see a lot of kind of microaggressions, subtle racism of Skiona towards this group. She just has some learned kind of bigotry, but she's not a hateful person, she's not got bad intentions. You can just very much see society's influence on her. For example, the pair of them have a conversation about magic. She's kind of filling him in on the basics around how magic works, and tells him about how too much magic was taken from the other realm and it caused this bridge to collapse. And he tells her that there was a number of Quen that were killed in this accident, but that was never reported on. It was kind of hushed up by the college because it was incompetence that led to this disaster, but it was never called a tragedy or a disaster, and these deaths were never reported on because the people, the general people, don't view the Quen quite as the same people. They've got their own language, they've got their own culture. They, you know, say things like, oh, they multiply like rats, they multiply like bunnies. So they've got this kind of xenophobic attitude to the Quen coming in, taking up space in their city and taking up a lot of resources, even though they're helpful and being a servant class. And this bridge story kind of shocks her, and she kind of realises a bit of her internal biases. But she herself is marginalised, faces oppression for being a woman, so her and Thomil kind of bond. He takes her out for a drink because her other colleagues didn't want to take her for a drink or celebrate her new role. And they have a good time, they get to know each other. Is there romantic tension? Not sure. I can't figure out how long it's been since Thomil got crossed into this city, or what happened to the baby. That's a bit of a mystery at the moment. Is she still a baby? Have like 20 years passed? Or have like 2 weeks passed? Probably not 2 weeks, it's probably been a little while. But like, what age is he? She's about 27, 28, right? But what age is he? I want to know, because I want to know if like, can I ship them? Am I rooting for a romance? Or is it like a father-daughter kind of vibe? She doesn't have parents. Could she be the baby? Is that a rogue theory, or have I just solved it? Don't tell me in the comments. Actually, you can, because by the time I post this video, I'll have finished the book and I'll know. So like, I guess it could be a father-daughter kind of vibe, or it could be romantic. Not sure. I don't really want to root for like an age gap romance. It's too toxic. I know we've had like A Court of Thorns and Roses and it's like a 500-year age gap, and that's really problematic and we kind of forget. But this feels a little bit more grounded, so I don't want that to happen, especially when sexism and oppression of women and other marginalised groups is such a big theme so far. But anyway, I'll read on and I guess I'll find out whether this ship is appropriate or not. all of that aside, the magic system is really cool. It's kind of an industrial city, and basically they have these spellographs, which are this kind of typewriter thing. It's all runic language, and what she basically does is types like code for spells, and it's very much like if you've done statistics at university, if you've done R, which is basically kind of a programming language in which you type out code that tells the computer to take your data set and do inferential statistics, other kinds of statistics. So you can do like your ANOVAs and your regressions and your t-tests, and you have to write this whole script, and then it will analyze your data set and give you all of the answers that you've asked for. You like will name your variables, things like that. So she's kind of doing that basically. She's writing a script that says, this is the subject of my spell, this is the action of like whether I want it to move or lift or whatever, and I'm going to source the energy from the other world, which is this like place created by God that has all of the resources they need and lots of energy. So she maps that because she's a mapping specialist. She will source where the energy comes from, how much she needs. It's all converted into like Veric tons or Veric meters or whatever. I think that's the right word. And then it takes the energy and it applies it and it runs a spell, kind of like running your R script. And you can like link all of these spells together into like a spell web. It's a bit of a chain, so if this happens and this variable is met, then this will happen. So it's very like physics and mathematics based. It's very much like doing statistics in R or any kind of programming language. So it's quite a scientific magic system, and I feel like this might be hard for people to get their head around, but I found it quite easy just because I've done statistics and R and understand the concept of R scripts. So this, you know, I was just like, oh, it's like being back at university and doing my advanced statistics course. There is a few pages at the back that kind of goes through all of the terminology for the spells, the rankings of the college and the mages, other things, can't remember. So I read those last night, even though I was already quite a bit into the book. I don't feel like it helped me that much because I feel like I did grasp enough of it just from the text by itself. But I think if you were newer to fantasy, that would be quite useful. So yeah, so far it's an interesting system, it's an interesting enough world, even though we've not seen lots of it yet. We've learned a lot about the college and like the religion, the different founding members, there's different like schools of thoughts regarding religion. Like there's the Leonic school of thought and the Terranish or whatever the city's called, school of thought, and they have some like subtle differences. And there's this really good sense of like history and culture, so it does feel like you're dropping into a fully formed world. I've seen it talked about before, this concept of like history in the world. For example, in Game of Thrones, you start Game of Thrones and everyone's talking about Robert's Rebellion and the Mad King, and that's not part of the main story. You're kind of picking up 17 years later, but the fact that all the characters know about it, they all reference it, you don't know the whole story, but you pick it up along the way. That's what makes the world feel really fleshed out and real. So I think this book has that as well, but it's also not too dense, and I feel like, you know, Siona's teaching Thomil about magic. You learn quite a lot from her doing the test to get in, so you like pick up the society structure, how the magic works and everything fairly easily. It doesn't feel super info dumpy, even though her teaching Thomil is a little bit info dumpy, but you learn a lot about both of their characters and what they know and their interactions. So it's not like giving Alice an ACOTAR where she's just like, boom, here's 6 pages of everything you need to know about Under the Mountain. It's done but with a bit more skill and a bit more care. I think all that's left for me to talk about so far is Skiona's character. She's quite an interesting character. She has like shorter hair and presents a little bit masculine because she's a woman trying to like live in a man's world essentially. She's not super traditionally feminine. A lot of the women in their world go into teaching and things like that, and she's not really accustomed to that. She's very ambitious. She talks a lot about
magic and power and how she's addicted to the power that magic gives her. She talks about how she struggles socially with people. That's why she's not very good at teaching. And sometimes she's not very good at reading social cues and things like that. So she does tend to watch people. She picks up on the fact that they're taking the piss or being disrespectful and then analyzes it and kind of chooses a response. But it doesn't come completely natural to her. I feel like she's written to be like potentially autistic in the sense that she has some social difficulties, but I also feel like she's kind of a savant. She's really competent and really skilled at what she does. She's really hyper focused on magic. It's kind of her special area of interest. Due to these clues in her character, I feel like she's written to potentially be an autistic character, even though autism might not exist in this world or might not be a diagnosis, a medical diagnosis in this world. I feel like that's kind of what the author's going for. And I think that's nice. I think it's a little bit different. She's not like your classic Mary Sue character. She's not your classic badass female lead character. So this is something a little bit different, and it's a nice representation of those autistic traits. I think everyone with autism is super different. Not everyone's a savant or a genius. Lots of people with social issues might struggle a bit more than Sciona at this point in the story. So I wouldn't take her character to be like an archetype of autism. I think it's really hard to even have that because everyone with autism is so different. Everyone has different levels of different symptoms on a spectrum. And this is like one of 1,000 different ways you could represent an autistic character. But I think overall it's a positive, and I think most autistic representation ends up being of men and boys. It's rare that we have females represented with autism, and it can look a bit different in women and girls. So I'm all for it. And regardless of, diagnostic criteria, she's a cool and interesting, smart, competent character that I can root for, even though she isn't perfect, even though she has some internal biases that I'm sure she will work through over the course of the novel. I will be back after the next set of 100 pages, or next time something really interesting happens and I've got something to say. So keep watching to find out what happens next. Oh, in this section, it does kind of cover just like what the blurb says, so it wasn't very spoilery, but going forwards we're getting more into unknown territory. So if you haven't read the book, this would probably be the time to stop watching, because I am going to get into like proper book ruining spoilers next, probably, I presume. And it's completely dark now, so I'm going to go to bed. Hello everyone, I'm back and I'm in a new house. Look at this new bedroom. Got all my knickknacks. Got everything looking very cute. Got my cute lighting. I'm all happy. Even got some new pillowcases with cool vibes. So things are coming together. I moved in on Thursday and now this is Wednesday. So we're getting somewhere. I painted this wall. I painted my office. Might do a vlog about the office. Was going to do a vlog about moving, setting up my office, setting up my library, and I've been too tired to be honest. I might still do the library one. I'm getting my bookshelves delivered this week and I feel like I'm having my energy return, so maybe I will do that, but maybe I won't. Moving is really tiring. I've literally like pushed my body to the limits in every way. I was ill, I was moving a lot of stuff, lots of walking, lots of heavy lifting, lots of emotions, making a big life change. And I also drank an inordinate amount of champagne at the weekend, so had a killer hangover. So pushing my body in all of the different ways, yay, love that for me. However, one way I've not been pushing my body is reading. I have reached about the halfway point of this now, just past the 200 page mark, but it's been a couple of weeks I think and I've barely read. There's been many days where I just didn't read this at all because I was just too tired. I didn't have the energy for it, to be honest. However, now that the move's done and I'm settling back into a routine, I am back on it. So we've reached a point in the book where this is going to be heavy spoilers. So if you've not read the book, don't watch on past this point. Go away and read it and then come back. You've had your warning and now I'm going to launch right into it, okay? So this last 100 pages, we've had, things going on between Sciona and Thomo, and they've kind of formed a bit of a crush on each other and they're working away at her project when Skuna develops this new technique which allows her to see the other realm in full colour. She performs this and Tomel remarks that this just looks like where he comes from. It's snowy, there's pine trees, there's like a squirrel going past, and she's like, wow, this is so magical, this other realm. And he's like, that's literally our realm. And then she channels a spell and it is basically the Blight. The Blight takes a bush in response to her casting a spell, and Tomel realises that the Blight is caused by this city. All of the mages, every time they cast a spell, it strikes someone with the Blight, depending on where they've channeled from in the map. And those forbidden coordinates in the map where they're not allowed to channel from, that is literally just the city of Tehran. So he's obviously pretty devastated. He already feels very subjugated, and he talks a lot about how his people in the city are treated as second-class citizens. No one cares when they die. They're basically put to hard labour, and if they can't do that labour, they're discarded. And now, as if that wasn't bad enough, they are literally using them as basically cannon fodder for these spells which aren't even that important. I'm sure some of the spells are, but they also do it just to like warm their hot cup of tea and to make the train run, to turn on a light somewhere. Like, it's a very high cost in life for such a small payoff, just for convenience really of the people in this city. So he has a huge fight with Skuna and storms off, and is basically just very devastated, and it's a very big realisation for him as well. Now Skuna also takes it very hard, but it takes her a bit of time to come to terms with this. She can't quite face the fact that she is committing these evil acts unknowingly, that she has already murdered hundreds of people with the spells that she's already done. And it throws her whole worldview, her dream of being a mage, into question. It throws her belief of God and her city into question. She has a bit of a defensive reaction where she's in denial about it to begin with, and then she's like, well, this is probably happening to your people because you don't follow the true God and you follow all of these other gods. Which is a bit bigoted, but it's in line with her beliefs. Eventually, after she talks to Brigham, he tries to put her mind at ease by saying like, oh, it's nothing, this is just a curse, this isn't real. And that doesn't really add up, it doesn't really make logical sense to her, so she starts to figure out that this really is the reality. She even does a little experiment where she goes to a part of the map. She sees basically this black girl on the beach in this community of black people living in the south, and she channels from her and she is struck with a blight and dies, and then she feels very guilty. She kind of goes into shock. She is devastated. It causes her to realise that this is all real and she has to reckon with it. And then when no explanations are good enough to explain away what she saw, besides the fact that this is true reality, she gets very depressed. She goes home and she's basically suicidal about it, which you can understand because she's not a bad person. At least she didn't have bad intentions, but the outcome of her actions was huge. This goes back to this discussion she had with Tomel where, in her culture, your intentions matter regardless of the outcome, whereas in his culture, it's all about the outcome and not about your intentions. So they both have slightly different moral code. I really like that about this book, that these two characters have different worldviews and they have these philosophical discussions about their different cultures and their different beliefs. I like that they learn from each other in this way. And I think this is a very good twist and direction for the book. I can't say I'm surprised. I think I kind of knew something like this was happening, but I think it's a very good metaphor for colonialism and for the way we live in the West. We choose convenience over ethics all of the time whenever you shop in, shops like Primark or H&M, where the clothes are made in sweatshops. You're basically exploiting other people just for your own convenience. When we use things like this, cheap electronics from China, that's probably come from some exploitation. When we're using excess energy and not recycling, that's causing negative climate impacts on people in other parts of the world. This can impact other people's quality of life and even death. And I think the Blight and the way that Tomel's community is treated within this Terranish culture is a good representation of all of those real world issues. So that's all I have to say for that 100 pages.
Good twist. I'll discuss it more as we go on, and I'll catch up with you after the 300-page mark, and we'll see what happens. But I'm really enjoying it so far, and I like that this fantasy world is grounded in reality in that way. See you in the next clip. Hi! So I just finished reading chapter 15, which is the chapter where Skiona goes to Brigham with all of her revelations, and he comes forward out with it and just says, yes, I know, I've known all along, which wasn't what she was hoping for. She was hoping that he was like naive to the whole thing and it would be news to him, but it isn't. So I'm on about page 262, so over halfway through. And I just have a lot of thoughts on this conversation. I'm not surprised that he knew. I was with Tomo all along that a lot of the powerful people in the city would be aware of the cost of the blight. But I think it's interesting to watch Skiona go through this revelation of, you know, everything that she believes in crumbling further. And a lot of it got me thinking about the broader world and our awareness of the suffering of others and the cost of our lifestyle. So in the West, we live with electricity, we live with all food accessible, stuff that can't be grown locally, stuff that's imported from overseas. We rely on like cheap labour from China and other countries where a lot of our clothing, a lot of our electronics is made in sweatshops. And this is quite hard to avoid, especially if you are lower income or moderate income. It's hard to afford really good quality products, and it's hard to even find products that are like made in the UK or made in America. We kind of knowingly shop unethically, and even when we try really hard to shop ethically, it's quite difficult to find things that are truly ethical. It's a bit like in The Good Place where everyone ends up in the bad place because we're so like detached. Our decisions are so detached from the reality and the consequences of them that no matter how good we try to be, there's always a lot of negative consequences down the line to our actions. And this is just kind of how our society in the West is designed. It's very systematic. Even since the British Empire ended and we stopped having colonies, we still kind of treat people in other countries as if they are our colonies and that they mass produce a lot of things for us. And that's a system that was built during the British Empire. And as an individual, it's very hard to kind of live separately from that. Like, you're always going to be somewhat to blame. There's always going to be some negative consequences to like everything you consume. And I guess that's kind of what this book is about. I also thought about like someone that is vegan, someone that tries to shop and eat in a way that doesn't cause any harm to animals ever, and that is literal a cost of animal life. And most of us that eat meat and eat dairy products and use any animal products are aware that animals feel fear, feel distress, die, and potentially suffer even in places where they have higher welfare, like in UK farming. They still suffer, they still die for a snack. And if you really think about it, that is quite abhorrent, and yet it's an abhorrent fact that many people, except vegans, choose to ignore kind of for convenience. And that's what Brigham and a lot of the people in this tyrannish society do. They ignore it because it's convenient, because they want this high quality of life. We aren't wrong for wanting, plumbing and electricity and access to hot water, because these are the things that help give us a quality of life. It gives us health and healthcare. But you could make an ethical argument that the cost of that is very high, especially in other parts of the world, and that really the world, the planet, would be better off if we all just kind of got rid of civilization, got rid of industrialization, and if we went back to like hunter-gatherer style communities everywhere. That would come with reduced quality of life for many individuals, but it would lead to an increased health of the planet and the environment, and the plants and animals living on the planet too. So yeah, this is just my thoughts. I don't really have any solutions. Like, it's a very complex problem that's made a bit more simple in this because it's a very direct siphoning and murder of like specific people. However, I don't think this is very far from the truth of how we live, and there are so many parallels to draw. I think there's also a lot of parallels with the religious aspect, how they kind of justify themselves by, it's their kind of God-given right. God gave them this bounty to siphon from. And I kind of hear that rhetoric sometimes from like Christians, probably from other religions, but I'm in a Christian-dominated country. Skuna points out some like logical issues with this kind of God argument, because the argument is basically that the Quen defied God, were heretics, and that this is God punishing them, and God wanted to protect the Terranish people and give them this bounty because they are faithful to him. And it's a little bit similar to the kind of Christian belief that, Christians that have this specific belief will go to heaven, and everyone else, if you don't believe in Jesus and you don't believe in God in this specific way, then you'll go to hell. But, how does a child in Somalia who died at the age of 3, who's never heard of Jesus, has heard of Christianity, has grown up in a Muslim like community, for example, why should they go to hell when they have like not even had the opportunity to believe and disregard God or Jesus? Doesn't make logical sense. And that's the same argument used in this. She says, a lot of these Quen, they live far away. This whole defying of God was hundreds of years ago. So the Quen born today, hundreds of miles away, have never even heard of this God. So how can they defy him? How can they be deserving of his wrath when, like, that's just not fair? It doesn't make logical sense. And yeah, you can apply that argument to the Christians that make that argument about who deserves to go to heaven and hell. So I think the book is a good representation of how we used religions to justify things that maybe shouldn't be justified. Not just Christianity, I'm just using Christianity as an example, but I'm sure all of the major religions do this to a degree. And I think this religious belief in a God, and God deciding what's right and wrong, and people kind of deserving what they get, and God deciding that, it allows people to relinquish a lot of like personal responsibility and control, even when that's not true and doesn't make logical sense. Like Skiona says, the blight isn't caused by God. The blight on the Quen is literally directly caused by them siphoning magic to, fuel their industrious society. This modern civilization that experiences a lot of privilege and has a real life cost to that. So yeah, there's some of my thoughts so far. I like that this book is basically comprised of a lot of conversations between like Skuna and Brigham, Skuna and Thommel, and some other characters, where they both take like a philosophical position on this world and kind of argue their points. And it's a good application of philosophy and logic and science within this fictional world. I really like that it ties to really difficult philosophical discussions about the morality of our real world. And I like that it's not too dense, it's quite easy to follow. It's, even though these are big topics and they're difficult topics emotionally, it's done in a very straightforward way where I'm reading it and I'm just going like, yep, that's like our world, that is so true. And now I feel bad, and that's good, because I should feel bad, because I'm as complicit as everybody else that lives in this world and that benefits from living in an industrial civilization. I mean, I just bought really cheap bookshelves from Amazon, put them up. They are absolute cheap rubbish, made from China, probably from people that are not getting paid fairly, that are exploited. So there you go. There's me directly negatively impacting someone on the other side of the world. I could have avoided supporting that by shopping local, getting something well made, paying a bit of extra money. But also maybe a multi-billion-dollar company like Amazon could not support this and condone this either. That's true, and I could just abdicate personal responsibility by blaming Amazon and saying it's all their fault, but at the end of the day, Amazon exists because people like me shop there because it's convenient, and this is why a lot of people boycott Amazon, and why I should also probably boycott Amazon. But then you try to look for alternatives, and they end up not being much better. Like, you could shop in Primark or H&M, and all the clothes are made in Bangladesh and India and Pakistan, and you're like, okay, those are sweatshops. So you go a bit more upmarket and you go to like Marks and Spencer's or Next, and then you look at the label and they're also made in similar places, and are probably just as unethical. So, like, how upmarket do you have to go to avoid this problem, and how wealthy do you have to be in a position where you can choose to be 100% ethical all the time? And you could be really diligent about like only shopping for clothes from ethical places, like from charity shops, secondhand, vintage shops, and a few really good companies that make high quality pieces. You could do that, but then you also have to do that for your food, for your electronics, for your furniture, for everything in your life, for your medications. And I feel like some people like vegans, they've have this one area of focus where they're super ethical. You've got other people that have one area of focus and it's like climate conscious fashion. But it's very hard to have a broad focus of shopping ethically and consuming ethically across every single category in your life. And so most people don't, because it's expensive in terms of time and financially, and just in terms of the mental load. But if you really boil it down, are any of these good enough excuses to not care and to not try? Probably not. And that's what this book kind of says. If you have any tips on living more sustainably, any companies that you know have really good morals that don't hurt people from around the world, that don't hurt the planet, leave them in the comments so that we can all try to be better and actually not just read this book and be like, that was entertaining, and then move on with our lives, but like read this book, really take in the message, and then use it to try and make ourselves a bit better. We might not be perfect, but every little helps, I suppose. All that being said, I'm losing my voice because of my COVID that I've got at the moment, and I'm gonna go and keep reading. Catch you next time I've got stuff to say. Hello, I'm back in a new set of pyjamas and it's a new day. And I've been reading this book all morning and now I only have 2 chapters left. So I'm going to read the last 2 chapters and I'm going to come on here again and let's discuss the ending. But I mean, just to catch you up with where I was last time, Scuona has gone in, all guns blazing, and she's basically did this spell, which means that everyone in the whole city can see the consequences of their magic. They can see with the mirror, her mirror, Feynman mirror, is that what it's called? The animals, the people, the plants unraveling in bloody flowers at all of the little spells that go around the city, and also the dome that protects the city. So this has caused a bit of an uproar, and now there's a big riot, and she's kind of been just sentenced to death for doing this. And she has regrets about how her aunt and her cousin feel about this. They haven't taken too kindly to it and to her doing this. Everyone's very upset and in a lot of denial. And it doesn't help that these people who didn't know what they were doing and are fairly innocent are kind of paying the cost of this, and that their city's being completely like looted, burned, etc. And obviously, quite rightly so, the Quen are all very upset too. So everything's a shit show basically. I think this part of the book does bring into question something quite interesting, in that if you could see all of the negative consequences of your actions, what would you do and how would you react? Would you stop and be like, oh okay, I just won't do that then? Or would there be this sense of denial? Imagine every time you ate an animal, for example, you had to watch slaughterhouse footage of that animal being slaughtered. I bet some people would continue to eat meat, but a lot of people would maybe stop, at least for a while, at least until they could forget about it and put it out of their mind and go on kind of in an ignorance is bliss state again. It's not true ignorance, it's kind of conscious ignorance, it's chosen ignorance, and it takes quite a lot of cognitive dissonance, a lot of like dissociating from the like truth of the matter, but people can do it and they do it all the time. That's why people have cognitive dissonance. I think a lot of people falsely believe that if people just had more information, if they just knew better, that would change their mind and that would change their behaviour. But so often behavioural science shows us that, you know, you can present someone with all of the truth and all of the facts that you want and they still won't change their behaviour. People will only really change if they actually want to. That's why people don't read like scientific studies and be like, oh, sugar is bad for me, maybe I should stop eating sugar. They learn that and then they continue eating sugar because it's a habit and because changing that behaviour is actually very hard. It's also especially hard if that's something is like your whole way of life. So like eating meat or eating animal products, that's your whole way of life, and it's not just like a habit to change, it's actually quite an overhaul to go full vegan. So that's why people don't do it. And I think this book demonstrates that psychological fact quite well. So everything's a shit show so far, but the next chapter is called Hope and Hellfire, and I think it's going to give us some answers about how we can stay hopeful, how these characters can stay hopeful within this kind of hell that's been created. We'll see if there's a light at the end of the tunnel and if things can get better. And I think that they can, but I also think it would be realistic if they didn't as well. So without further ado, let me finish this bad boy. So that's me done. I finished it. It was a good ending. It was satisfying. I think Siona's death was satisfying. I like that she didn't feel any pain. I like that it was very righteous. I like that she took all those motherfuckers with her. I like that Tomil and Kara made the final decision about, you know, the vengeance and how things should be going forwards, and that Tomil kind of gave Kara that choice as well as a child, as someone that's got more of a future than he does in this world. And I think it's a nice full circle moment, him and Kara and a lot of the other Quen fleeing the city, going through the barrier and back out into the wilds, hopefully a safer version of the wilds, at least from the blight, and into a new hope for the future. I also like that we got a bit of a conclusion between Skiona and Tomil. We got to see their final moments together, the kiss that they shared, this admission that they loved each other. It was good. I like that the book wasn't romance heavy, but it did have a little bit of romance. It gave me something to root for, and it was a complicated romance given that they have different, you know, beliefs, and they were on opposite sides a lot of the time and discussing things and trying to get on the same page. She eventually comes around to his way of seeing the world, and he's a lot more pessimistic or realistic than she is. She's a lot more optimistic. But I like that despite their differences, they found a love, even if they didn't have much hope for the future. So ultimately, the book was tragic but hopeful. It was a good metaphor for real life. It contained a lot of good philosophical discussion around moral philosophy and environmentalism and all of the things I've already talked about in this video. It's probably a very long video by now. So unless I pop back on with more thoughts, I think I'll leave it there. I think I've digested it as much as I need to. I feel like I've been digesting it well enough as we go along. So that is that. Let me know what you thought of Blood Over Brighthaven in the comments below. Let me know if you like this kind of more casual vlog style of me reacting to the book as I'm reading it and as I'm going through. It was quite nice to do, seeing as I've been moving house during this whole process of reading the book, and it's a bit less intense than sitting down to film all at once and getting a script and getting all my thoughts really cohesive. And I think this was a good book to do it with because there's a lot of things that I wanted to discuss as I read it, so it's perfect. But I think, you know, choosing the right book is the key for like this format going well. So if you know any other books that might work for this kind of vlog style reading vlog format, let me know. Maybe I'll do them. Otherwise, for my next book chat, I'll probably just go back to, you know, wearing not pajamas, wearing makeup and sitting in front of a backdrop and talking about it a bit more eloquently. But it's nice to try new things and mix it up sometimes. Thanks for watching if you made it this far, and subscribe to my channel for more. Bye!